Yeah, baby.
But there, but there is much more. I think to me, it's more significant to have a basis for why we're even doing this thing called voting. And it's based on a right that we have that's given to us by way of the Constitution. So that's where I am so far. That was like the genesis of it. And that's what we continue to be. I would want to continue. I want this to continue to be a dialogue that one can have. So we can have, I find it interesting. I can go places and people can talk about the latest episode of XYZ and what an actor is doing, but we can't ever just have regular conversation about that which is probably very important to us as individual citizens, and that is our rights. And our rights are being impacted by whatever is going on and by whatever election or process that's in place. And that I think is a conversation and just being able to open up and have a place where we can talk about it.
I agree with you in that, and I would just like to say I was. Let me just show you. I can show you better than I can tell. I
Okay.
actually printed out a copy. It was only 19 pages, right?
Okay.
So I printed it out, and automatically I became fascinated. Even though you gave me a small little print, I became fascinated a few years ago. I even went to the congressman's office to try to get copies for you. And and so I'm going to take my time to read through it, because the first thing that I found was the premise of it being created was the balance of power from the well off to the it's really talking about it's the people's constitution. And so people have taken it to be something that they can manipulate the power, but the purpose of it is to balance the power. And so uh, you really enlightened me to learn more about it. And there's a couple of things that and I'll ask later, because it was some words in there that I didn't quite understand. So I said that I would follow up with you. But so far, does anyone else have any questions for Annette?
Mm.
That's okay if you don't. You can continue, Annette.
Okay. So from there, I kind of like you. I've been kind of intrigued by this document that we are never ever as natural born citizens, we never ever have to look at it again. The other interesting thing that happened around this same time was one of my mom's caregivers was studying to become a citizen. She's from the Philippines. And she had an extensive test, and they have to study the Constitution, unlike anything we've ever had to do, and have to pass a test before they can become naturalized citizens. And that I found was intriguing to know that this woman from the Philippines happens to be, she knows more about our rights, than what I know. And so the other thing that I think this conversation that starts with the Constitution Cafe has to start addressing is not only the structure, because of course the first part of the Constitution is the country and how that's. And
Sort of,
by the time we get to the amendment, go
you're
ahead. I'm
freezing,
sorry.
Annette. You're freezing. You're
I'm
freezing up.
freezing.
Mm-hmm.
All right, everybody's freezing. We're good.
Go ahead.
Okay. So the other piece that I thought was very important, because we first need to understand the Constitution does very specifically address the various parts of our government, which allows it to be a democracy, different from an autocracy and monarchy and all the other stuff. That's established in our Constitution. But then the other part is where our rights come in at. And so I find it intriguing, and I'm still a student. I'm learning them too. But it's like, okay, what are my constitutional rights? That becomes a question for me. First, it's constitutional as opposed to civil rights, as opposed to human rights. And so one of the little questions I had when I was doing the table as a resource table is I just would ask the question, how many constitutional rights do you have? How many civil rights? Are there 5, 10? And I couldn't answer the question. And I think it's worth asking. And it's worth for those who are interested to look into it. So my most recent discovery is that our rights as they are laid out in the Constitution are outlined by what we call the Bill of Rights. It's the first 10 amendments, really outline our rights as citizens of this country called the United States of America. So I continue to be intrigued by it. I think but for me, it's like a conversation. I'm not trying to teach a class, nor do I want to study. I know if you wanted to take a civics class, there are places to go and schools where you could learn about it. You know, I have friends who study political science, and those would be the next level of people. If you were in college, it's folks who study political science that really have a grasp on our Constitution. But if you didn't study, I was a biology major. I never looked at I didn't look at the Constitution in college. I was studying public speaking and science and math. That's what I studied.
Now, would you say that that it's important to pick up the book? And because I just got it offline, right? And just said, print the Constitution. And here comes the whole thing. And so I think that as the cafe continues, then maybe that's something that we could do, like break the sections down where
Absolutely.
we give it some thought, like what does this really mean? Like you started off with the Bill of Rights. It's like digest that first so that you can see what foundation we're standing on with this document that controls our lives. And so I think the more people implement their actions, such as the police and the government, and if these things are not correct, then that's really the most important, is knowing your rights so that they're not infringed upon.
Also, so that you don't fall for the okey doke. It's like, sometimes you watching a person on television, a political figure, and they'll say one thing, or they're talking about rights or changing something, like suspending the whatever the conversation might be. And it's like, well, it may sound like a good idea until you start understanding, whoa. The Constitution is the only thing that gives me certain rights as a citizen. If there was no Constitution, what would I be?
And I you know what, Annette, and I thought that same thing today. I was like, okay, so if we didn't have the Constitution, what would guide us? What, not to say that we agree with everything that it represents, because we may need to look at it and see what amendments that need to be in place. But some other people think it needs to be eliminated altogether. Wink, wink, Project 2025. And so that's the document that they want to have as the Constitution of this United States. And so therefore, we have to even be more engaged to see what is it that someone wants to change it to, and how can we best benefit from knowing it ourselves and making it an issue and making it our narrative. Any other comments?
To me, that's why this is so important, because it has a grounding effect. It's like you said, Annette. You can hear people talking about doing all kinds of things governmentally, but what is the baseline? What are our rights? Why is this a debatable issue? And what's the debate? You know,
Right.
we need to all start off on the same foot. And revisiting this document is how you do that.
Right. And I think it also helps to give you some idea. Like, I know a lot of people talk about they don't even know how to choose or select someone to vote for. Or people go, sometimes we grew up and I watched my mom do this. She was just blue. Whatever they said, whichever lever they told her to push, that's what she did. All the way up until her last voting, she took into the voting booth with her a little flyer that came in the mail that said punch all these different punches. Basically, it was punch the Democratic ticket with no thought about it, right? And I think we've evolved. And today, that's not good enough. That's why a lot of young people and a lot of people pull out from voting at all, because it's just not good enough to say, I'm just going to vote that ticket without any other rationale. And nobody encourages us to even have this conversation. So, hence the Constitution Cafe. I wanted to become the conversation so people can, just discuss any and all of it.
Yeah, because our current
Mhm.
political climate has nothing to do with the Constitution, and none of the political debates and turmoil and strife have much to do with the Constitution. It's completely taken out of the equation, and that should never have happened.
I agree, Christine.
Yeah. And as we
Christine.
have fallen further and further away from what the Constitution has outlined for us and the rights they have given, we all have
Mhm.
seen what has already been taken away from us. And how do we start standing up, especially with the Supreme Court that we have in place now? And, how do we even fight in the framework of a legal, opportunity to have our voices heard? And to me, this has become very frightening. And a lot of us don't engage in it because we just don't know how, or if there's a voice. And
Right.
one thing, and it's a small thing, but even the beautiful sounding of the Constitution Cafe is very inviting and safe feeling. And to have a conversation, which we're falling away from more and more with the technology. So, Annette, this is so important and welcoming. Thank you.
And thank you, Jan, because every point is well taken. And I think what you're saying about the fear of not knowing where these people are taking this, because they are they took an oath to uphold it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're seeing right before our very eyes the crookedness and the disregard for the law of it. And if these people are getting away with breaking the law, then how can we tell the rest of the country to be proper? And so it gives credence to someone who's like, well, none of them are following the law, so why should I? And then we don't want to have a
Mm-hmm.
lawless society. And so we do need to continue to have this conversation. And Annette, you've taken the lead. And so we're just going to make sure we keep talking
Cool.
about this Constitution Cafe. And,
Oh,
people are going to be looking for a brick and mortar pretty soon.
a place. They're gonna be looking for a place. Well, and I really want to take advantage of the technology, but I am no longer surprised. I absolutely understand when these young men and the young men I used to encounter on the street, and they just go, "Well, it's all a setup. It's all crooked, and what's the use?" It's like that really gives me purpose in saying we've got to at least open up a conversation, because if we had more conversation about the importance of my opinion and how I choose, and maybe my one vote by itself doesn't mean anything, but as it is a right that
Fix your
is
camera.
outlined.
Fix your camera in there.
Me?
Yes, your face was half your face was gone.
Half my face was gone because I'm
Yes.
holding my phone in my hand because I couldn't. I apologize. I couldn't get it to come up on my computer, so I'm holding my hand and then I'm shaking my hands all over the place. I apologize. But I just, it gives,
the best
you
thing
know,
for that.
I was hearing my young men say that why even bother, and it's all a setup and all this. And it's like, you see it more and more, especially at this time of year when there's all this politicking going on. And it all just looks like such a, I'm not quite sure what the words are, but it just looks like such a performance, I guess, is what it looks like. But politics being what they are, I'm like, I have to look beyond the politics and the performance and go, it's still very important that I execute this right given to me in this democracy to make a choice and to raise my voice for that, whatever, the candidate, the position, the whatever it is you take. And I would never attempt to tell anyone, like I said to my young man, who to vote for, but we can start using this framework of this document to give us some, as Kit said, the foundation for how you choose to select a candidate and select and move forward in this place called the United States of America, which is supposed to be a democracy, which is supposed to be I am one of we the people. It starts off, we the people. I'm one of those we the people.
And that's the issue. When you exclude and as you move away from knowledge of the Constitution, you forget that. That is supposed to include everyone. You, everybody. Like you said, we the people.
Right.
It becomes what it looks like now, rich white men fighting over power.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the and I guess one of the amendments that it's almost like it's been there forever, and all of a sudden it was a focal point, and that was Amendment 13 that was passed by Congress January 31, 1865, and ratified December 6, 1865. And it says, Section 1, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Now, to me, that sounds like you are still a slave if you are incarcerated. And so that should just make someone think, I don't want to be that. And so the understanding of that may make it more something that people wouldn't want to be. And so that's just one thing. And look at all the other things that we haven't interpreted, or, just reading it opens your mind to it all. So, Annette, we have one more guest that joined us, and that is Sandra Campbell. Welcome, Sandra. And Sandra is also a part of the Chicago Communicator News Media. And Sandra, we have Annette Britton on as the guest, and she has a concept called Constitution Café, where she talks about the Constitution and the premise of its origin, where it may take us, and the things that we need to be more informed of. So you want to tell us, Sandra, a little bit about yourself?
Oh, good evening. I have very little to say about myself. Nice to welcome you, Ms. Britton. I'm very interested in hearing about your subject, especially the Constitution. I'm a retired civil rights officer. Do a little bit of community activism in my community. Have done a lot of different things here in Chicago with, again, CAPS and again, community activism on the Southwest side. I'm just now enjoying my retirement or attempting to enjoy my retirement if people quit calling on me to do stuff.
So tonight we've touched on the origin of the Constitution, and the cafe part is the discussion that we're having right now. So it's ongoing. This is number one show for Annette Britton, and we do agree that we need to continue sort of breaking down the Constitution. And Annette will take that lead on what the next steps would be. So, Annette, you want to continue?
Well, I would hope that the Constitution Cafe is going to continue to evolve into and just to continue to be just that, an open conversation. I imagine it much like you go into the coffee shop. You walk into a coffee shop, you get a cup of coffee, we can start having a conversation about anything, right?
Mhm.
But this one is very specific. We're going to start talking about the Constitution and what that means to me, what that might mean to you. And if it evolves, it will be an evolution. It's going to be a natural evolutionary process. For me, it has to do with, of course, voting because we're in that critical time, and that timeline is a part of my Constitution Cafe. Also, I really want to look at and just understand better our rights, both constitutional rights as well as civil rights, as well as human rights. And I think I have run across different documents that outline like human rights are like across the world, right? Everyone has human rights. We want to believe that, but I mean, there are certain things. I just want to have this conversation because I realize I don't know enough. I know enough to eke by, but I really think there's a lot in this little document called the Constitution, and it can lead us into some other conversations, which may just help us have a better appreciation for this whole process. And that we don't have to be so politically polarized. That's the other thing that bothers me tremendously, that people have these tags and there's all this polarization that has nothing to do with being a citizen of this democracy.
And I think it would also give people more ownership of the process. Like you said, you talk to people on the street and they just say, "Oh, I'm not in it. This is all rigged and yada yada." But if you really understood what it's supposed to be and how far we've gotten away from
Mhm.
what it's supposed to be,
Mhm.
um, it gives more people ownership of the process.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because right now, apathy has the most power. It does.
Mhm.
Apathy has the most power. It has momentum. And something like conversations like this can start to crack through that.
Yeah. You said that very well. I said, I'm not trying to teach anything. I want to help be a part of that cracking. I want to understand it better myself. And I believe I want to share that with others who feel likewise.
Mhm.
And I think you're doing that, Annette,
Mhm.
because we're here tonight talking about it.
Mhm.
And I think, you know, I'm quite sure that some will go to the internet and was like, let me look a little deeper. So when
Mhm.
we meet again, we'll have a better communication of questions that we want to ask, because
Of course.
just scanning the thing today, I was like, oh, so you got to be 25 years old to be a representative. you've got to be 30 years old to be a senator. That was just a couple of, things
Yeah.
that and I just
Mhm.
didn't know that. And so,
Mhm.
we need to let younger people know, listen, you can have a full-time job as a representative at 25 years old if that's your aspiration. And
That's
Right.
true.
one of my mentors, mentees, her name is Lauren Leggett, and I've mentored her for some years. Haven't talked to her in a
Mhm.
long time. And she told me just a few days ago that I know that she's going for two PhDs. She said one was in anthropology and the other one might be political science. And so
Mhm.
she's the kind of youth that could be that catalyst to share with her peers. So I will definitely invite her to the next session, as
Yeah.
well as
Mhm.
Sandra's grandson is brilliant at knowing the language of government and politics, and I think that he would be another young person that could share with us, and we can share with him as well.
And
Any other
there are
And
questions? Go
and
ahead,
there
Christine.
are thousands of them in that age range that they
Mhm.
don't know that you really could have some power and some
Yes.
say so in this. And because that age group doesn't know this, and they don't know the Constitution, they don't know that their rights are really a real thing that they're supposed to be protecting, is why we have all these old white men in power.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what
Mhm.
I mean? We
Mhm.
we always still need a new supply of new energy, new ideas, and all of that. And it gets choked off because of basic lack of basic knowledge of something like the Constitution.
Very well
yes,
said,
Yeah.
Christine.
That's
And
well. Yeah.
Christine, I'd like to just
Yeah.
follow up just a bit. I love what you just said, and I will repeat that over and over. I'll give you the credit for it. Rights are a real thing. That
Yeah.
is so
Yeah.
powerful. That is a powerful statement.
Yes.
I won't forget that.
and I'd like to know how many of us know that there are two United States, one United States of America and the other just the United States. How many people know that?
Mm-mm.
No?
Mm-mm.
So on our next discussion, I will bring some information about that to the floor. That there are two United States, one United States of America and the other United States. And so the Constitution, I think, was written for the United States of America, but there's the United States that's a business. And I don't know if it is held to the same stipulations or regulations as the one that is the United States of America. Look, take a look at that. Take a look at that.
Yes. I've never ever heard of that before. And what's running through my mind as I hear you speak about that, I'm thinking about particularly the lawsuits that are being brought against our former president. And is it the United States of America versus, or is it the United States? And
That's right.
really so intrigued to learn about the difference and how
Yes,
it's being used today to break down our confidence in the Constitution, even if we don't know about it, because we all feel powerless in one way or another because
that's
of the
right.
state of our politics.
That's so true. And I'd also like to say that people that look like